This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute professional advice. We make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, completeness, or applicability of the content. Some feedback from our first episode. People thought that maybe we should cover what some of these terms mean, because we are familiar with the terms, and people in rescue and shelter advocacy are familiar with a lot of the acronyms and terms, but a lot of you out there might not be familiar with them. So we thought we'd do an episode, a visual episode, where we can talk about a lot of these terms and the statistics and what they mean. And so then you're a little bit more well-informed for our future episodes. So
Right.
Michael, talk to me about live release rate and what that is.
Okay, let's, we thought we'd start out something more fundamental, a basic approach here. The shelter generates a lot of data, and this is how you can evaluate and measure the performance of how well the shelter is. There are all sorts of metrics like average length of stay, unhealthy, untreatable, and the live release rate. So we're going to keep it really simple. We're just going to look at the live release rate today and look at how that's calculated and the outcomes that are involved that are considered for the live release rate. And mind you, in order to achieve non-kill shelter status, you have to have a live release rate of over 90%. And sadly, the last time that this shelter had achieved a 90% non-kill rate was back in fiscal year 2020, 2021. The cat population has suffered greatly over the last several years. And you'll see, just looking at the data, that there used to be a big push with rescues, getting animals out to rescue under the previous shelter management team, previous shelter manager Lawrence Gomez and his #1 coordinator, Monique Rodriguez. And, you had a fairly large percentage of intake getting pulled by rescues. And that has not been the case the last 2 years. So we just want to make you more comfortable and familiar with the data. You can go onto the shelter website and you'll see a public dashboard, and that's the dashboard that shows these outcomes. And so there are 5 outcomes that go into the live release rate calculation. We'll just call it LRR for short, right? You have
also known as the save rate is the other term people use.
Yeah, save rate. Some people call the save rate. So you have adoption, obviously adoption. You have rescue. You have return to owner, return to field, and you have transfer. So, you may transfer animals to another shelter, like Humane Society of Silicon Valley is a big transfer partner. 95% of the cats transferred wind up going to Milpitas to HSSV. Okay, so, but it's always not all that simple, because there are 2 different ways to calculate a live release rate. And shelters over the years have adopted the Asilomar calculation for a live release rate versus what the ASPCA, how they calculate the rate. And so I'm going to be really rudimentary here. And it's basically a fraction, a numerator and a denominator. So here's the Asilomar method. You can see this. It's live outcomes divided by all outcomes. Here's ASPCA, live outcomes divided by intake. Gee, I wonder which one is going to have the bigger denominator. Intake or just outcomes? So the bottom line is that shelters use the Asilomar method because it's kinder. It's kinder to the shelter as far as performance is concerned. It makes them look better than they are, because they're not looking at all animals admitted for intake. They're just looking at outcomes. The Asilomar calculation is based on outcomes. So you can't even be considered in the live release rate unless you have an outcome. And what can happen is a shelter can sit on all sorts of animals and just warehouse them, and there's no outcome, right? So you're not going to get a real-time sense of what's going on at the shelter with a live release rate that just purely looks at outcomes. Maddie's Fund, guess which calculation formula Maddie's Fund endorses? Take a guess. If you guess this one, you're right, okay? Because it's based on intake, not outcome. So I just wanted to mention that. SJAX, as well as most municipal shelters here in the Bay Area, use the Asilomar method. So just wanted to get that in there. Let's go to the first slide, the first screenshot.
Okay.
We're going to take a look at, on the public dashboard, on the Animal Shelters website, a screenshot of intake, of a detailed intake. There are several different tabs, and this will kind of give you a summary of intake. So Rebekah, if you can bring that up. All right, so you go on the public dashboard at SJAX. It's there on the front page, and this dashboard has gotten a lot better, basically because I complained so much to Matt Lesh, the Public Works Director, about a year ago. And now you can actually compare. These are all calendar years, and I selected animal type. You can see cat and dog there, and all intakes. And so these are calendar years 2020 to 2024. And up at the top, you can see the gross number. So, and then on the bottom there in the lower left, you can see the intake types, right? And the colored, so that the charts, so obviously the dark line at the top of each chart is stray, right? And we're talking cats here. This is just cat and dog. I'm sorry, cat and dog. So the top number is strays, and then I'd say the other intakes are going to be owner surrender, euthanasia requested, and maybe a couple of confiscations and some transfer, maybe 10 or 15 a month transfer, but it's mainly stray, okay? So it's pretty simple. But look at these numbers up here. Last year, they did 12,325 intake, cats and dogs. And the year before that, only 11,526. We hear from management time and time again at these city council meetings, oh, we're maxed out at capacity. We have record amounts of animals, and everybody sympathizes with them. But that's not the case. Check out 2021, 14,511 dogs and cats came in through intake. And actually, if you add wildlife, it's 16,900. And so there was another 2,400 in wildlife, like bunnies, birds, what have you. I think last year in 24, there was maybe 1,300 additional in wildlife. But there's literally twice as much as that back in 2021. So when people say at the city of San Jose, and you hear city council members even promote this narrative too, oh, the shelter's maxed out, it's so antiquated, it can't handle this volume. Well, it did in 2021. It did in 2021. Good. So, and there you have it right there. 14,511 cats and dogs, 16,900 when you add in the wildlife total. So there it is. So you get to play with this. You can see at the top tabs there's a tab for intake summary, and then intake statistics, and then detailed intake statistics. This is the detailed tab where you get to compare with other, years, different animals, cats or dogs, or everything. And then again, I like to look at calendar year. City governments work on fiscal years. Fiscal years are always like 6 months behind because by the time the shelter presents its annual report at the end of the year in December, they're just reporting on the fiscal year of the prior fiscal year, and fiscal years end in June 30th. And then they start again July 1st. So I like to use the calendar year. And here's a great, display illustration of, the last 5 years at the shelter right there. And so let's go to the next, let's go to an outcome summary. This was intake. Let's look at outcome summary for dogs and cats. Okay, here's the outcome summary. And again, you have several different tabs up there. You have outcome statistics, outcome detailed statistics, right? Where you can compare years and stuff in a more detailed way. But here we have in yellow are cats, green isn't, are the dogs. And you see the outcomes there: adoption, rescue, RTF for return to field, euthanasia, RTO is return to owner, transfer, died, and missing. And then you have a pie chart showing the outcomes as a percentage of each other. And then again, I picked cat and dog. I left wildlife out, and you can see that, cats are 69% of the total outcomes. They're a very large portion of what comes into the shelter as strays and winds up, being outcomed one way or another. Now, up at the top, it shows that you actually see the live release rate there. 82% for cats for the calendar year last year, 93% for dogs, and 85% overall. So we all know why the number for dogs is at 93%, and that's because of Don Piazza, a volunteer who has literally given her heart and soul to the city of San Jose, and sadly was not hired as a rescue coordinator, full-time rescue coordinator. We'll have more on that. We could devote an entire episode to that, I think. Rebekah, I think we could probably have Dawn come on as a guest and talk about her effort and how she's contributed to the shelter. I mean, the dog population has had a much higher save rate than cats. It's been between 93 and 96% for the last 5 years. And a lot of that has to do with Don Piazza and her just tremendous ability to place dogs in rescue. People trust her, rescues trust her. They know they're not going to get jerked around. They know they're going to get medical records when they ask for them, and Don delivers. And that's why that save rate is so high for dogs. So I just wanted to mention that. Cats, 82% last year. In 2023, that number was as low as 73% due to the panleukopenia outbreak that the shelter just couldn't get a grip on. So, and again, I want to point something in the very lower corner there. It'll tell you when this was last updated. You always want to make sure and check that out because it's not always updated all that often. Sometimes there'll be like a week or two before an update occurs. And I've even brought this up with the deputy director, and he's unaware because they're looking at a different dashboard. I think they have an internal dashboard, but the public kind of, you have to make sure that the data is updated as of, and this is updated as of, February 28th. So we're looking at pretty fresh data here. Let's go to the next slide, the monthly outcome summary, where we're going to look at each month. So we can kind of drill down. We can like peel back layers of the onion. So here's the monthly. Again, cats are in yellow. The green are dogs. And here you see the total outcomes: 7,862 cats, 3,508 dogs, and total 11,370 for calendar year 2024. And here you get a monthly display. You can tell when kitten season kicks in earnest in April, stays relatively high through August, and kind of continues to stay high, really. Kitten season is almost all year round now. You know what? Rebekah, any insight on that?
Well, I noticed they've started to post kittens already, newborns, in February this year, which seems like it's going to probably end up being all year due to probably climate change and just because people are on the alert for kittens and might take them from their moms when they don't really need to. I know that
Right.
in some parts of the state, like in the Central Valley and like in Fresno, they genuinely have kitten season year round because of the weather there. So I think we're heading in that direction here too.
Right. So this is a monthly display, which is really cool. You kind of get again, become more comfortable with, how the data is presented. And let's go to the last slide of outcomes detail. So we're going to drill down one more layer here. And you can do this with the tabs. The tabs are up at the top. And one of the things I want to mention too is when you're on the dashboard, just remember this, because sometimes I get so bogged down looking at these numbers, I forget which ones I'm looking at. The top portion of the dashboard is intake. And then the bottom portion is outcome, obviously. But there are also these tabs, that you can flip-flop back and forth on. So just, be aware of that when you're looking at this. So again, this is monthly outcome. We need to go to the detailed. So when I first got involved in this, and Jay Torado, the deputy director, had rolled out the dashboard. And this was back in the summer of 2022. This dashboard didn't exist until around, like July, August of 2022. And it really wasn't ready for prime time. It had some issues, which we all brought up. And it took them about a year to finally start fixing things because the data, it was just so bad. But what I would do also is you can make a public information request, right? So you can, Freedom of Information Act, you can set up an account with the city and you have a login ID and you can make requests. And what I like to do is the first of every month, I make a request for the previous month's kennel statistics report. So here is a summary of the kennel stats for January of 23. So what I want to do is we're going to look at January for 23, 24, and 25 to just look for some trends and just kind of become more comfortable with the data, right? So what's interesting about this is just the summary that you see, but this goes on for another like 20 some odd 25 pages, because you get to look at every category. Like adoption, they'll have the animal's ID number. All 86, they'll have them from top to bottom. Rescue, they'll again have the animals listed by ID number, and they will also share with you who the rescue was that pulled the cat or dog. And kind of get an idea who the most active rescue partners are, with the shelter. So here, 86 adoption cat, I'm just going to keep focusing on the cats because that's what I know best. 19 died, rescue 23. Again, this is January, right? So it's kind of off season for the shelter. You're not in kitten season really yet. Return to field 3, only 293 cats in January. Well, let's go to now January of 2024. Okay, here's 24. So adoption goes up big, jumps from 86 to 207, which is nice. Again, we're comparing January over January, 23 to 24 now. So now we go from 86 to 207. Rescues, about the same, 27. They were 23 in January of 23. Euthanasia, 49. It was 28 in January of 23. So that number popped up. And return to field 40. So in January of 23, it was 3. Now it's at 40. Now, just remember that when we go to the next screenshot. By the way, you're going to see foster as an outcome here. We all know it's not an outcome. So heard this time and time again. The same people keep saying it's not an outcome. We all know it's not an outcome. They just include it in this table, but it does not go into the calculation for live release rate. Okay.
Makes their numbers look better, I guess.
Yeah, they want to keep track of it. Maybe what they should do is put it on its own separate tab, right?
Yeah.
Have another tab showing foster, maybe average length of stay, other metrics, but clearly foster isn't an outcome. It's just a location.
Right.
The animal's still in the custody of the city, it maintains the same ID number. So let's go to January of 2025. Adoption, again, 201 was 207, so constant. Died in the care of the shelter, only 7. That was 14 the previous year, 19 before that. But rescue, 26. It was 27 the year before, 23 before that, fairly flat, no growth there. Euthanasia jumps up again, 64. It was at 49 the previous January.
And again, these are euthanasia. These are not ones that are requested by somebody bringing their pet in. These are euthanasia done by the shelter on their own.
Exactly. Because there is an outcome there of request euthanasia. You can see it's 13, right?
Yeah.
So transfer 32, it was 54 in January of 24. It was 107, I think, in January of 23. So that number has gone down. But the number that really pops up at you, I think, is, again, the return to field number, 208.
Huge.
Massive. I mean, it's a 520% increase over January of 24. This number 3 years ago in January of 23 was 3. Then it jumps to 40, and now it's at 208.
And we think we know what's happening.
We think we know why. We're not going to talk about it this episode because it's
that could be a whole episode, really.
Yeah. And so we can save it for later. But this is what you can do when you just get a better feel, become comfortable. If you're a curious person, right? Most successful people in life are curious. And I found this to be very curious because this really is the performance of the shelter in a nutshell. Now, mind you, again, there are over 100 people at the shelter that have access to this platform. They're not all properly trained. There's going to be some erroneous inputs, right? Where people mix up categories or outcomes. So this isn't the end all be all, but it's the only thing that we have. So this is just comparing January, the month of January, 23, 24, 25. And obviously, it's great to see adoption up there as high as it is. Euthanasia has been trending higher. That's troublesome. Of course, they are taking in mostly sick and unhealthy animals. But yeah, the RTF number is certainly very fascinating. So now I want to come back to a false narrative that's been promoted by the shelter, even the public works director. And it revolves around cat rescue. So let's look at, I want to bring up the 2021 screenshot of cat rescue. So with the dashboard, you can select various outcomes and just focus on one outcome. Here, I've selected rescue as an outcome, and I wanted to look at this chart from 2021. And I want to prove a point here. This is one of my pet peeves with the management team at the shelter, how they've ignored rescue. This is 2021. Mind you, you had 2 rock star veterinarians in Dr. Tyson and Dr. Sharon Osterman. You also had my colleague who had started Kittens First, where I was a board member for 3 years, Dr. Tiva Hoshizaki, who worked part-time and was a neonate specialist. You also have a shelter manager who was very passionate. He was creative, did things outside the box, exported cats up to the Pacific Northwest to rescue partners that then took them to Canada, because Canada, believe it or not, has a shortage of kitties. So he was very creative and very passionate about his job as shelter manager. And then we had a lead coordinator, Monique Rodriguez, that was also just worked a ton of overtime, totally dedicated. Literally in the back of the shelter, she had little Post-it notes on each kennel telling ACAs what this cat's favorite food was. I kid you not. So this is 2021. The shelter did 3,162 rescues. 3,162 cats went to rescue in calendar year 2021. And that was 28.4% of intake. Okay. What a great opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And Lawrence and Monique were totally committed to this. They were on the phones all day long, on the phones, talking to rescues, developing relationships, making sure they got medical records in a timely manner, and they got, you know, an accurate assessment of the animal that was being pulled or the rescue partner was interested in. So this is 2021. 3,162 cats went to rescue. It was 28.4% of intake. Let's go to the 2023 rescue screenshot. That's not a misprint, folks. 646 for the entire year. For the entire year. They practically did that in 1 month in 2021.
Yeah.
As a percentage of intake, this was 8.7%. Only 8.7% of intake, of cat intake, went to rescue in 2023. Now,
I have a question.
Mind you.
I have a question. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, could this be lower partly because they started the kitten foster program back up again in 2023?
Yes, that and the Pan-Luc outbreak. I think there
Right.
were some rescues out there that just couldn't trust what animal they were getting, right? But you're right. This is when Tara Davis came in. Jay Tirado brought in Tara Davis from a small Northern Nevada Humane Society that may have only seen 1,700 animals at intake a year, and it wasn't open intake. And now all of a sudden, I mean, they brought in someone who was completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume. And, you know, was it a poor hiring decision? You know, I'll leave that up, you know, to our audience. But and here we are, 2024, 851. And this was a little bit of a bump up from the 646, right? I think I actually saw this, you know, in their annual report. Hey, we had more rescue participation. Yeah, you were what? 30% higher from a number that was essentially zero.
Right.
So this is the drop off. And so you can see that 2023, 2024, we're talking 8.7% went to rescue in 23, 10.5% in 2024. And, you know, when you ignore rescue like this, they don't usually come back. They've already now moved on to county or Los Baños or other municipal shelters where they're being treated better, and they're getting medical records in a timely manner, and they're getting good customer service, and people aren't dropping the ball. So, you know, we heard Jay Tirado, who's the deputy director of the animal shelter, in December of 2023 in front of City Council. He admitted that they had ignored rescue partners and they were going to re-engage for 2024. Well, here's your 2024, folks. They didn't re-engage.
No.
He failed. I even went to the podium and said he failed.
Right.
So 2 straight years ignoring rescue.
Here's
And just,
23 and 24. Yeah,
yeah, and
not
just,
much better.
no. And so these relationships have died on the vine. They've atrophied. These rescues have gone to other places. Um, you know, there's great work by volunteers I hear down at Los Banos. I know, in fact, you know, one of my friends, Kathy Cabrera, she and her husband Rick, they've been pulling insane amounts of cats out of Los Banos, and they're all the way up in Antioch. They don't even
Uh,
deal with San Jose. They're pulling animals from Los Banos, and they're located in Antioch in Contra
right.
Costa County. Um, and that's, by the way, that's Kitty 911, K911 rescue. Rick and Kathy Cabrera, just some of the greatest people you'll ever want to meet, really. I mean,
And
just salt of the earth.
Scritch Kittens and Feral Freedom are also pulling from Los Banos more now too, as I understand it. I mean, they've
Yeah, no, it's a
been
group
helping there a
effort,
lot.
and
Yeah,
you've got people volunteering down there, and you know, I mean, it's it's literally a trailer with a swab cooler, for
yeah,
God's sake. You know, there's no veterinary care. They euthanize for space. You
yep,
know, 12 to 20 kennels fill up, and the animal control guy comes in and starts euthanize.
right.
So they've actually been recognized. I think in the last year they became, you know, non-kill for cats.
With rescue help, which, you know, again, it underscores how important rescues are.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
there's no way that would happen otherwise.
right. And mind you, one of the Maddie's Fund recommendations when they did their audit, when Cameron Moore did her audit of SJAX in July of 2022, one of their recommendations was to appoint a dedicated, I repeat, dedicated rescue coordinator. And lo and behold, they finally did it, but it took them 28 months. 28 months. And by the way, they did not hire the rock star known as Don Piazza.
Right.
Go figure. So that'll be another episode. But
Yeah.
here you can clearly see, you can get a feel, you can see the chart, how it's illustrated. You can look at the months and get a feel for the data. Now, does anybody on city council do this? No, no, not at all. And we'll get to that now. So anyway, you can see cat rescue's been completely ignored. It's too bad because uh, before, just 4 years ago, it really drove live outcomes for
Yeah.
these cats in the shelter.
Yep. Hey everyone, thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed our tutorial on the San Jose Shelters Public Dashboard, and we hope that it gave you all better understanding of how to evaluate the shelter given the data that's available to the public. We will see you soon on our next episode, coming shortly. Please remember to like and subscribe, which will increase our exposure and get the word out to as many people as possible. Have a great day.